This is the 34th lecture. This event we are organized jointly with IIT Madras, Air Quality Management Association, CEPHA network, and several other institutes who are supporting air quality management research. We have started this Air Quality Management Association, and this is a unique body in the whole country, which basically focus towards understanding and contributing to address the air quality issues within the community. We inaugurated this about a year back in presence of our director and that time chairman, Tamil Nadu Pollution Control Board. So we offer the membership, which details are available with the air quality management website. And if you are interested, you can also put your email to the chat box, and we will respond to that. And we will share the membership details, basically, which allows almost all category of people who are working in the area of air quality research. Then the other partner for this event is CEPHA network, Clean Environment for Planetary Health in Asia. So basically, there is again multi-institutional, multinational, activities. We organize several in terms of documentation, documentaries preparation, community activities, research publication, workshops and symposium, panel discussion. Also, we have started a newsletter, Prakriti, which is a quarterly newsletter, which is also contributing in addressing the environmental issues across the globe. These are all some of the events which we have carried out. This picture shows. In addition, we also started this air quality management conference. This is one of the oldest conference, I can say, in India, which basically addresses air quality management issues. We call it as an Indian International Conference on Air Quality Management, basically focused towards measurement, modeling, health risk, and public policy. And we are successful, and now the 8th conference will going to happen at IIC Bangalore. Again, we are collaborating with various leading institutions in India and also outside India. And this time the conference will be held during the December first week. Let's coming to the air quality management lecture series. This is a first of its kind in India. We started in October 2020. We are approaching close to 3 years, and as you know that the current lecture is 34th lecture. Basically, this particular lecture series provide a forum for young researchers, scientists, and engineers and educators to share their knowledge and understand what is happening in the area of air quality management. And we can also come out during the discussions what is the latest technologies available in addressing the air quality management, which also provides an opportunity for the collaboration with stakeholders and experts from the various countries. So these are all some of the eminent speakers who have given the talk in the earlier air quality management lecture series. And the last lecture was given by Professor Richard Webster from, he's a professor in NTU in Singapore. So in the current lecture will be delivered by Mr. Prashant Kokil. So I request the Kopika to introduce the speaker and about the talk. And thank you all, and welcome to the Air Quality Management Lecture Series. Over to you, Kopika.
Very good afternoon to everyone. It's my great pleasure to introduce the speaker for the day, Mr. Prashant Kokil. Mr. Kokil has done his master's in inorganic chemistry with specialization in control and analysis of pollutants and is a qualified safety professional. He is an environmental professional with 40 years of hands-on experience in environmental pollution and governance, obtaining environmental clearances and consents, environmental legal compliance, compliance to environmental conditions and loan agreements with national and international lenders, environment and sustainability related risk assessment and mitigation planning, due diligence for mergers, takeovers, and acquisitions, international disclosures like Global Compact, Global Reporting Initiative, Carbon Disclosure Project, strategic planning for climate change and related resilience, dynamics for changing environmental regulations, etc. As head of the Corporate Environment and Climate Change Department of the Tata Power Company Limited, he has hands-on experience on environmental management in thermal, hydro, and renewable generation, transmission, and distribution segments. He is also associated with Mumbai University as visiting faculty for its master's course in sustainable development and environmental management. He was also designated as CSO for Tata Power's Mumbai operations, overseeing environment, CSR, and safety and risk functions. The talk for today is titled Air Quality Management, Where We Are Today, where he'll be discussing various aspects of monitoring, regulation, challenges, and changes in the air quality management area. So once again, we welcome you. Please share your screen for the talk. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Gopika, and thank you, Dr. Shiva. And before I start and share my screen, I would like to, वंदन करना चाहते हैं. गुप्ता जी है यहाँ, SK Gupta जी. So, sir, with your permission, I will start my lecture. Thank you.
Go ahead, sir. Please go ahead.
Yes. I hope everybody is able to see the slide. So I'll move on. This is the discussion. And before I get into the discussion mode or start talking, I would like you to know I'm a field person. So I may have somewhere strong views which may not be agreeing with your views. So please accept them. We can always have debate, but let me put forward my views. Second, most important, you are most welcome to discuss. I am not a professor, so we can always have discussions revolving around the practicalities of implementation as well. So with that, I will start. So let me ask you this question. Does air has original quality as such? What do you think? Air is a mixture of many components, and it's not having a fixed composition per se. It's an average that is actually being considered as composition. Now, once you have that, then where is the question of quality? It can have any composition. So obviously, when the quality criteria comes in, that is where when we start learning that certain gases which are present in air are actually not good for us, or they are bad for us. And that is where actually quality starts, right? And the variations which are there, which are actually natural as well as, anthropogenic, they are actually going to be there. Now, when you have natural variations, you have natural tolerance and exposure limits which are there. There are adaptations as well. Now, let us go look at these things. What is it? We started knowing things of composition, what are the components of air and all those things. Once we started working on it, our knowledge enhanced, the monitoring techniques enhanced, and we realized that there is a health impact because of certain gases being present or being present in enhanced numbers. Now that is where actually first time the air quality limits were established. And obviously the reasoning or the criteria was being safe for human consumption or exposure. And once that realization came, then we started realizing that the lesser the numbers, the better it is for you. And we started, reducing our emission limits or the quality of air, that is the pollutants so-called pollutants, criteria pollutants, the name you whichever name you give, they are actually getting reduced in numbers, right? What we really missed is that the other elements of environment are automatically considered as safe and they are not considered for deciding these limits. I'm just parking this concept. We'll discuss this in detail later. Well, once we had this as a criteria, that is human health and survival as a criteria, we created the air quality limits. Then we started doing source control for avoiding these exceedance of the limits. But when we had a big bout of industrialization, the survival of the industry took priority over human survival. And then focus shifted from the source control or elimination to dilution and creating tolerable limits. A bold statement, but it's good for our debate. And what are the missing links in this concept? Well, what is the cumulative impact? Very rarely we do have considerations of cumulative impact, and I'm talking of two types of cumulation. One is the cumulation in the area and cumulation over the time. Well, many of you may be aware that we have finite life of any particular pollutant which is present in the air, and that gets cumulated over the time when you are continuing emissions. And that's the reason why cumulative concentration becomes important over the time. And cumulation due to multiple sources is another part. Both together, the cumulative impact can happen, and that is never considered in true spirit. Second, long-term exposure effects of the pollutants is not considered to the extent it is supposed to be. Well, when you have that what is good for health or tolerable for health, then you don't consider the exposure of extended time for a concentration which is very close or on the borderline of the limits prescribed. Third part, anabolic bioaccumulation and its effects. Well, this is normally done for metals or other toxic elements, but not for air concentrations. Very little research has been done on this anabolic bioaccumulation and its effects for air pollutions. Impact on floral and faunal elements. Many a times we do use indicators, but we do not give importance per se for this kind of impacts while we are doing various studies and also the emission impacts. Assimilation capacity considerations are, really once you are within the limits prescribed, nobody talks of assimilation capacity at all. And of course, the long life of pollutants in the air, which we discussed as long-term exposure effects also. But that's something which we need to actually consider for various possible this. You might have heard of this in respect to climate change, that we do have consideration of lifetime within air for the gases which are causing climate change but GHG gases, but we have never talked about the lifetime of SO2, NOx, etc. Well, what are the changes that are happening? First, the dynamic changes is about the technologies and techniques. Both technologies for controlling and techniques for measurement also and controls also. Then scientific knowledge through experiments and research. Well, we are going ahead with various types of experiments and research, which actually helps us to have more knowledge and to have more course corrections, which is absolutely necessary. And the pace at which this is happening is really good, and that actually helps the cause. And the example is lifetime of pollutants is assessed and used to estimate potential damage now. And this is something which goes in while allowing emissions. Well, the dynamics of continually reducing emissions, well, let me give a citing. Uh, if you look at the timelines of change in regulations, it used to be about 20 years for change in regulations earlier. Now, almost every between 2 to 5 years is the change, cycle. Cycle time is 2 years. So within 2 years, we learn new things. We have new technologies to control, and then we move on to reduced emission limits. Then regulations for conservation of environment is in consideration of various aspects. It is not only for humans. Everything is considered, almost everything. The moment you feel that there is likelihood, the precautionary principle takes over and it asks you to be better on the positive side of erring on having no damage. So that's something which is being considered and being implemented as well. Let us move on. Well, regulatory environment, that is something which is required. What do you think? Do you think that the regulation is required? And if it is yes, why should it be? The reason being the first bullet, the right to freedom is interpreted in a negative way. That means I will do whatever I want. And you need not be ruler or controller of my actions. Now, that is the negative interpretation of the freedom. And that's where the regulation actually comes in, that you are not allowed to do what you feel free to do. And you have to do certain things in conjunction with others and in a controlled manner so that the damage to others as well as to the elements in environment is minimized. And that's where the regulation actually starts. So that is where actually the interpretation part comes in. Once you have the regulations, it will just say you do this or you don't do this. As you go ahead and learn more things, you need to change these regulations. And that is where the change is being resisted also. And the reasons being many, including the economic considerations and the cost of setting up things which are no more required or which are proven to be damaging. If you want to change them, then you need to have a conflict to be resolved and make the regulation, which is supposed to be implemented and used for corrective action against the newly discovered negative impacts. So my question to you is it working? Yes, partly no. We are still a long way to go, but it is there. I mean, we are on the path. That's my take. You may have a difference in opinion, but my take is that yes, we have moved in that direction and we'll be covering it, how it has moved in that direction soon. When we talk of regulation, what is imperative and most important is the monitoring. Because when you talk of regulation, you have control limits and you have limits for various things. Then you have to have monitoring which is good enough, robust enough, and which will help in actually deciding whether you are following the regulations or not. Any ambiguity in this kind of assurance for monitoring or ensuring that we are within the limits is going to cause more disputes and more agitations against the regulations. So what are the changes? Rapid change in regulations. I'm just giving you an example. Everybody knows we have major source of power as thermal power stations. And see the number of times the fly ash regulation notification has changed over the years in say last 5 or 10 years. And you will know what I'm talking of. So this is what is called as rapid change in regulations. We learn more, we change the regulations and try to implement that. Then what is the big change is focus shifted from permitting to compliance. So earlier, the getting clearances was a big challenge. And it was an uphill task. Many things would happen before you actually used to get the permits, the clearances and consents to establish and operate. And now it has been the other way around that you fulfill the set of conditions which are required to be done and you will get the permits easily. What is more difficult or what is more challenging now is to comply with the conditions which are prescribed. The focus has shifted from proving the compliance and it's more of a challenge because simple reason, except for the environmental regulations, all other regulations assume that you are not guilty till you are proven to be guilty. Whereas in environmental regulations, you are supposed to be proving yourself that I am not guilty. Till that time, you are assumed to be guilty. So this compliance part becomes most important. And for that, the positive proof of compliance approach is what is needed. Now, that is something which is being practiced in many industries now. And it's not a monopoly of few houses, that is for sure. That's the change. That's the shift which has happened in thought process that I will better comply or go beyond compliance than being on the wrong side of the regulation. Second shift, second important part or thought process that shifted from managing regulators to managing environment. I'm putting a bold statement over here. It was the case earlier. I have been in this field for 40 years. It's no more the case. I would definitely and proudly say that we have changed a lot in this particular aspect. And we are now preferring to have managing environment as our priority than managing regulators. The compliance levels have increased. People prefer to spend money on compliance than management of regulators. Well, the regulators and regulated started partnering for the cause. Now, this is what is something which is the next level of maturity, which I am purposely quoting here. We have seen many such interactions which come up because the changes which are incorporated in the regulations are through the process of collaboration and consultation. This is something, the provisions were there in the act, they were always there, but were not being used in true sense, which has changed now. The industry associations, the thought leaders, the think tanks like IITs, they are participating in this kind of debates and it is helping the regulators to really roll out the regulations which are useful and which are actually doable, executable in the practice. So that is something which is a real change which has happened. The causes of change, of course, increased consciousness. People know that I am supposed to be responsible and they own up that responsibility. That is something which is the main cause of this change. Then second thing is there are multiple stakeholder demands. If somebody else wants you to do it, and if especially if it is an investor, then you actually try to do it because you can't just ignore your stakeholder. I'm not talking sustainability at all. I'm talking about the things which the stakeholders persist and insist to commit and execute for the industries. Investors' compulsions. Yes, the people at large who actually come together to form the investor banks or investor agencies, they force the industries to actually do certain things. The consciousness about the water footprinting, the emission reduction, continual emission reduction is being actually forced down the throat of industry by investors first. The regulations come next. So that's something which is important driving force for this change. Then comes the fast track courts, the NGT. NGT's interventions have actually caused changes, and people have started using the knowledge to avoid being dragged to the court. So that's actually drive for increased consciousness and the drive to meet the requirements, follow the norms, be better in your performance than what is the regulatory requirement, and be on the positive side of the law. Then comes the principles like polluter pays and precautionary principles. Now, this is being actually together with the regulators and the NGT being implemented very religiously. And the setting up of, the exact ways of calculating the penal provisions like payment of compensation, payment for the damages cost, and the payment or recovery of the cost of restoration. Now, these were, actually not framed earlier. Now they have been framed. So you know exactly what is going to be the cost of non-compliance. And that is something which actually drives you to do compliance in a religious manner. Given that the reputational risk of good industry houses is also equally contributing to the causes of change. The high cost of non-compliance, of course, you know that the damages and other things are not in your control. If somebody assesses that it can be a make and break situation for a company to bear these costs of non-compliance. So that's something which is actually driving. So these are actually some of the causes listed, main causes which I have listed over here. Well, let us talk of challenges now. And I'm just putting this to us, all of us, as a thought process for considering. Do we really need to further reduce emission limits? Well, if you consider health aspect, yes. But can we afford it is also a question. The economic viability of the best technological options is always a challenge, and we have to come somewhere in between. And I can, I have actually posed this as a problem later for discussions. But to what extent do we really reduce the emissions? Is it worth it? Are we blindly following the developed countries while deciding reductions in emission limits? These are the questions. Are we considering our own settings as per climate here in our continent, or we are just doing this? That is something which is important for the purpose of debate, which we definitely need to do for this reductions, further reductions in emissions. Then choice of technology. I'm using that word NIMBY. I think many of you might be aware of this. It's a short form of not in my backyard. That means I would love to have facilitation of technologies, but the negative impact should be actually in somebody else's backyard. So we need a major portion of our power in the cities in a concentrated manner, but we don't want any power station to be within the city. And what we give as reason is that we have residential area in the city, so there should not be any industry within the city. How far this is good? Well, a question to debate again. Are you not challenging the people who are away and asking them to suffer for your convenience? Then the next part is, if really we are all committed to the environmental betterment, are we not overdoing controls? Do you need percentage of your capital investment without depreciation as fees for consents to operate? And in return, what do you get? Then the controls. I mean, there is a path forward. The change is always happening. But the question is, if your limit is 50, if you are on 49, you are compliant. And if you are 51, you are non-compliant. How does this fit into the this particular question, the overdoing of control? That's my question to all of us. That includes me too. Then question is, when we go for any changes, who pays for it? And can we really afford to do it? That's the real question which is there. I mean, it's something which has to be affordable. You can't just have things being done for the sake of environment for which the people cannot pay. So that is something which is a very important criteria as well. Inertia to change, yes. People don't want to change, especially if you look at the industries, the the depreciation or the change in technology, change in equipment, it is being resisted. They want to make maximum use of what is already installed. The obsolescence part or the decommissioning and the clearing of earlier technologies, etc. It's not done. It stands there as monuments, but we do not, actually raise it or remove it. So if you really look at, there is hardly any activity on the restoration part or post life of particular equipment being decommissioned and actually taken out of service. That kind is not at all being serviced from regulatory point of view also and from the environmental aspects also. It is left to the individual companies or the industries to do it in a manner in which it is done in an environment friendly manner. That's something which is left to individuals. Coming to the bold bullet, are we doing enough or it is only just enough? So there are initiatives, there are things being done which are actually into the realm of individuals. So the question is this: are we doing enough, or we need to do something more? And this is what is the ambitious program that is actually being proposed by government is trying to ask us. Now, if you look at the challenge of going net zero or other things, there are disputes, there are counter views, but still, that is something which is actually pushing us to go asking this question again, that is it just enough or it is enough? So that's something which pushes us for more and bigger challenging tasks and to achieve higher levels of reductions in our emissions. Then comes the next question: do we need further research or not? There are many people who feel that when we do research, it is a waste of money because it is not of any use to a common person or common people who are actually being affected by the industries. But that's not the case. That's my personal view that we really do need further research. And the reasons are given in some case studies which I'll be sharing with you. Let me go ahead. So this is one case which I am about to share with you, the case one. You might have heard of the mega power plants which were proposed by the government way back in 2012. And one of it was with Tata Power, that is at Mundra, Kutch. And what we did is we did many studies over there with multiple modeling and other things. And what is the situation today is it is about 8,000 plus megawatts, both Tatas as well as Adanis together situated in a common place, which is Mundra. Now, what we did is we did extensive studies, all of us. We have certain control measures and all those things, but still, when we have done all these things and found that there is supposed to be, as per the models which we conducted, a substantial increase in the GLC, ground level concentrations of certain parameters, especially SOx and NOx, right? And actually, when we did model conformity studies later, after the commissioning of the units, when all of them were operational, we could hardly see any increment in the GLC at all. It was done on extensive period of time. Outside monitoring was done. All receptors were monitored specifically where there was a likelihood as predicted by models to know whether there is any real life increment or not. And that's something which we observed was just on the marginal levels where you cannot really attribute it to the emissions from the power plants. Now, this is a unique thing. I mean, that's something which is a case where you need research, the real research. Why? What is it? What is it that is causing this phenomena? Is it some secondary conversion which is reducing the availability or detection in the monitoring? Or is it getting diluted? Or is it what is it that is happening actually? So that is something which is a challenge. Now, these kind of situations where it cannot just vanish. The SOx and NOx cannot just vanish. We have never seen any incidences which are actually can be related to the emissions being done through this. That's something which is a challenge. No excessive fog, nothing. No, see, you can go through and you will know that Kutch is a region where there are extremes. But these extremes, even the cold is extreme. So extreme cold should cause the fog and smog and other things which have never been seen. Not beyond the natural phenomena which actually happens over there. So that is something which is, and this is an honest statement I'm making. I'm for environment, not for the company or any particular house. So this is something which is the challenge which actually made me think of putting this over here as a challenge for all of us as a community to do some research and work on identifying possible causes which will lead to a more sustained knowledge. Second case which I would like to pose here is about the recent changes in the emission norms. We just moved in 2017, we moved from load-based standards. We moved to load-based standards. The emission standards were changed to the numbers at every point of time. Earlier, it was like, the stack height was the only control measure, especially for SO2. Now that we are having the limits prescribed for SO2 on milligrams per normal meter cube basis, the imperative came as being, the forceful implementation of FGD technologies. Depending on where you are situated, you have to use FGD technologies. The coastal ones would prefer to go in for the seawater-based FGD technologies, and the inland ones will be based on the limestone technology, wet or dry, whatever it is. Now, this lowering of emissions was prescribed in 2017. A time was given, actually was given only for 2 years from 2015 to 2017, but was extended later. And when actually we see today, there are hardly any plants which have progressed and have implemented this particular aspect. And we saw certain funny things happening. That means, the 500 megawatt plus units were prescribed to have 275-meter stacks as per the earlier notifications. And now suddenly it has changed that this particular unit, being 500 and above, was required to have SO2 of the order of, say, 100 milligrams per or 50 milligrams per normal meter cube as per the age. And then they come up with saying that, please allow us to have a new lower stack which will have lower emission load. Is it good or is it bad? And that's why I have used that little bad word over there, spitting on other side when you have 275-meter stacks, and when spitting on your own shoes when you are having a lower stack of 100 meters. Because you have reduced your emission by using FGD to say half or 1/3 of whatever was the earlier emission. Is it something which actually helps the environment, or it is not good for people? Now, this is something which is a challenge, which we all know. Fortunately or unfortunately, I was involved with Tata Power's Trombay Thermal Power Station, which is situated within Mumbai in Chembur area. We expanded to meet the power demand for the Mumbai city. And we were asked by the government or the regulators to stick to your own limits which are there. We are not going to give you enhancement of emission limit because you are in a critically polluted area. So we were lucky to have management which would say, okay, that's the condition, so why not do it? Let us do it. Can we not fit in the process the control measures which will help us to be within the overall limit prescribed for the station and still have expansion? And that's how we ended up with having the first FGD in power plant in 1986. And since then, we have been operating it successfully with proper control. And that's something which is being possible, is being forced after so many years. So that's something which is a challenge. And well, we have 275-meter stacks, 152-meter height stacks, everything as per the then appropriate, the then applicable regulations. The limits were prescribed and were being followed. So now this is the challenging situation where you have to have this kind of considerations before we actually start using these things. That is the challenge. You can see smaller stacks sitting next to the tall stack as an indication for having a FGD over there. It's an indicator now. Anyway, I'll just stop here, but this is something which I would like to discuss when we open the floor for us. And that's all from my side. And, thank you for your attention. We can always have a debate. This is something which is for my contact. I am open. And being professor, if I have dragged something, please excuse me. Dr. Shiva, over to you. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Prashant, for a nice talk and bringing more of the regulatory aspect, which is not very critically looked in the scientific community, and also maybe many students and researchers may not aware of it. There are key challenges that need to be addressed. And thank you very much. So before we open the floor for question, if you have any questions, please type your questions in the chat box. And before that, we'll have one nice group photo with everybody. Could you all start your cameras? Please, all of you, start your camera. Okay, others quickly. Gopika, can you take a picture, or we're going to take it? Mahalakshmi or Gopika, can you just one of you take the picture? Gopika, can you take? Oh, it is done. Okay. Thank you very much. I mean, Prashant, this is very interesting to notice. The first you started with a very nice way of asking that what is the standard for air quality. It is important for us to look at it in the context because we talk about air quality in different areas. For example, in residential area, because we have a standards for a residential area, sensitive area, and for commercial area, industrial area, like that. But it means that there should be a different, air quality as a in the beginning. So if that is all same or it is different, I think that revolves, very
See, we
important
actually
question.
are, Dr. Shiva, we are actually not. I'll share one example if you permit me.
Sure.
I hope we don't mind going beyond 4 o'clock also.
No, please go ahead.
Yeah. So, see, my experience I'm sharing, we had taken loan from multiple banks all over the world, and they used to come to Mundra for checking out. And the ambient air quality monitoring which I used to carry will always show higher levels of particulates. PM matter was always high, and they used to blame us, saying that this is because of you. So I said that it's not so. It is a natural setting which is there, which we can't change. And there was always a debate going around on this. They were not ready to accept. And when that expert panel actually came to visit Mundra in the month of April, there was a sandstorm. They were on the field and they could not see anything, and they had to cover their faces to save themselves from the sand. So after that, there was no debate about PM. So that is something which is, the real life experience. Now, see, this is something which, when I'm telling on the basis of the data, it's not acceptable because you have never seen anything like that. Once you see that, then you realize that it is the natural setting over there, which is, if we are actually not presenting it as a truthful, monitoring, then it is going to be a challenge. So that is something which is very critical. This is what is the reality. It's something which is wrong representation if we don't really consider that and show it that it is so. And what we try to do is that we try to show off that I am within the limits all the time. That is where, the criticality of monitoring and honest representation comes in.
I think this will leads to another interesting question. Maybe, since you have worked in the corporate for more than 4 decades, and we always noticing, we emphasize mostly on monitoring, and I always have some discussion on this topic, because the monitoring always is a location specific, and number of samples collected, duration of samples collected, so many complexity involved in that, and agree that the monitoring is essential for understanding its characteristics and also to meet the regulatory requirement. In this connection, what is your view? How do we change this mind setup? Like, instead of monitoring, definitely we lead to more, resources, and sometimes not presenting the appropriate data. You said you showed here as an example. So what is your view on that? How do we, from the regulatory point of view, how do we look at this aspect, or from the industry point of view, what's your suggestion?
Well, first I'll go with industry point of view because that is where I work for. So the most important thing from industry perspective is that everybody should, from the industry's perspective, should understand that this is your insurance. So it has to be, kept intact. See, when you take insurance for your car, for your personal insurance, for your health insurance, you do everything in a proper manner so that nobody should deny you in case something happens. Now, if you look at the parallel of this same approach in your monitoring, you will be right there. Now, this is something which is very important to understand. If you do right monitoring at right places, the amount which you spend is going to help you in fighting out claims against you. Now, this has become a trend that everybody tries to blame somebody else and seeks compensation. Now, this is something which is very important, and that's where your honest reporting to the authorities comes in. Just don't try to fudge with the data and project that I am within the prescribed limits. Not at all. You can always justify what is the reason for these high levels of, even beyond the level which is actually prescribed by way of the limits. It is a reality which needs to be actually considered and reported. You can't expect that a refinery premise will have no alpha benzopyrene when you do ambient air monitoring. It's just not possible. Now, a Trombay plant is sitting next door to the refinery, so it will always have that alpha benzopyrene coming into the monitoring. The source is not the power station, but the adjacent refinery. But do I fudge and say that, okay, I don't have anything? No, that's not correct. So this is where actually the correct monitoring and reporting comes in. And unfortunately, the industry side feels that routine data monitoring is actually not the right thing to do. And it should be a minimum cost item. And that's where, everything goes wrong. Then people tend to do less of monitoring and only reporting with a pen or a laptop report. So that's something which is not good for anybody. In fact, if you look at the regulator's point of view, and many cases in NGT have shown that the regulators come into the beating. And that's where their, the role in doing the real-time reporting also comes in. If you do something which is, you may see that the monitoring is being done next to the roadside. Because it is as per the High Court order given to the State Pollution Control Board that they are supposed to monitor the effect of pollution due to vehicular traffic. And if you use that data as, the data point for decision making for whole of Mumbai, it's not correct. Because it is monitoring adjacent to the source. And that was the purpose for which it was designed. And with that data, if you start, giving solutions to pollution in Mumbai or, basis of the suffer and other things and actions which you are designing, I think we are bound to end up with an error or no results rather. So that is where actually regulator also needs to be prudent. And I have seen many a times See, we never had any problem with Mundra despite showing higher levels of PM monitored during the baseline data monitoring. Because obviously, if you have, 500 plus as particulate matter, the earlier TSPM levels, and your contribution through stack after, the control measures is going to be maximum 1 microgram or 2 micrograms, it's insignificant contribution. So there is no reason why it should be stopped. And when you project that, it is something which is accepted. It's not that it is being, denied on the basis of the existing status of the air quality. It's not. So it's something which we should not be afraid of. It's something which is convenient for everyone. For, when you actually go into litigation, you are standing on the same side. So regulator and the industry part I have covered. Now let me come to the people part, the social aspects part. Let me tell you, I was there for almost 5 years, going continuously off and on in Mundra. We, being a World Bank assisted project, I mean IFC assisted, not World Bank, IFC assisted project, we were required to do multiple public consultations. And we always used to ask, because even World Bank people used to be there, the ADB, IFC, KXIM, everybody was there. And then they used to ask people whether you are being affected. And whatever was being affected was corrected by us, by realizing that yes, it is something which is there. And what is not observed, and what was observed as positive, is that these people, being locals, they have a very resilient system. We get affected by change in weather, but they are not. They are ready or willing, and they have no adverse impact of sandstorms, whereas we do have. So that is something which is the adaptation part which I have put in my this thing. It is an observation which we saw. Nobody, not even infants, they do not suffer because of the high levels of PM. Whether it is a nature's gift or adaptation, I don't know. I am not an expert in that. Maybe some doctors from health angle can give some explanation, but it needs to be something which is to be worked on. So this is what is my other point which is there. We always talk of bad impacts, cost of health effect, all those things. They are good for calculation purposes, but how realistic it is a challenge. I'm not saying it is not there. See, what I'm saying is that we need further studies and ground truthing based on our conditions, and that's something which is very important to take forward. Okay, Dr. Shiva, have I covered the things the way you wanted?
Yeah. Sir, I am audible to you, sir?
Yes, yes.
Yeah, I think Professor has left the meeting because he has to attend some urgent this thing. So he has left the meeting. So it is requested that, sir, you continue your experience in with monitoring and other aspects. So after 2 minutes, we can.
But Dr. Masudan, 1 minute. I just have some guests here.
Yeah.
I just thought if you have any question, because you are from the regulatory side, and I also thought maybe Gupta ji can also ask a couple of things, because from the students' point, I think they were not much aware of it, what's happening from the regulatory point of view, although they may be good in research. So I was just, that was an idea. I think maybe Gupta ji, can you just initiate? I'll join after 5 minutes.
I have already put a question in the chat box, in the question answer box. But I will ask that question directly now from Prashant.
Yes.
Sir, my question to you is that you made a very good observation that in spite of having a 8,000 megawatt plant at Mundra, Kutch, and in spite of burning 128,000 or 130,000 tons of coal every day, there was no significant increase in SOx and NOx.
Yes.
So why this aspect was not further researched? What were the reasons? why there was no further, there was no significant increase in NOx, SOx and NOx? Because this is a very interesting observation. And
Exactly. I mean, this is something which is
it,
nagging me, sir. That's the reason why I put it over here. So this is
yes,
something which is obviously, not digestible as such. You just can't digest
that's
that
why
there is no
there is
increment.
research. It's a matter of very interesting research. Why this
Yes.
significant increase was not there? Was it because of meteorology, or was it because of you can say
Sir, you are actually raising a issue which I will just say, unfortunately, our plant being in losses, we could not fund that particular research. So it was not taken up by us. Otherwise, we would have done it.
uh,
But it's something which anybody in India can take up as a challenging subject. It is a reality. If we
yes,
can. And why I am suggesting this, there is a different reason.
hmm,
Are we missing on something which is good, which
yes,
we converted as technology for SO2 control, which is cheaper and different than
yes.
FGDs?
Why are we investing in
That
so
is
much
the
in
challenge. That
LPG?
is the challenge which I am looking forward to as an answer. If we can resolve this, we may end up with some technology which is existing in nature, which is taking care of this particular aspect of SO2 emission control, which we are not aware of.
That is true.
So
That
we
is
may end up with that. That's my wishful thinking. If we can do that, that will be
yes.
great. Uh,
I think
in
attention of
order to
regulators.
continue, yes, sir.
I think attention of regulators is to be drawn towards this kind of aspects. That this is a matter which needs to be investigated very deeply, whether it
Sir,
is
yes.
government
If you
secondary.
look at the NTPC's concentrated things and basis which the compulsion for FGD was imposed, and here
Yes,
you have 180 degrees opposite as a phenomena which is being observed. So which
yes,
definitely needs an attention from regulators as well, and they should come forward actually to, involve with some real good institutions, maybe more than one, possibly.
Prashant, I don't know whether you are aware that there is a change happening now in the country, that people from the industries are being asked to take over regulatory roles. In Goa, it
Yes.
has recently happened that Mr. Mahesh Patil has been appointed chairman. He was from industry. Maybe one day you
Okay.
will also take over as chairman of some pollution control board and
Hmm.
bring in good new things and good thoughts. Congratulations. Thank you.
Thank you. Uh, uh, may I just add on, Dr. Shiva, one more thing. See,
Yeah,
when I mentioned
yeah,
that
Prashant,
49,
okay, please,
uh,
please add it. There also,
uh,
after your this thing, there is a one chart question is also there. You can address that.
okay, I'll just look at the chat first, and then we'll go. Okay, Mr. Kare Gowda. Okay, we are actually not yet matured enough to handle this question. The question is, how do Indian air quality regulations account for cross-border pollution from neighboring countries? The answer is we are not accounting at all. What we are accounting is whether my ambient air quality is good enough or not. If not, then what happens is that anybody who is next door or within that airshed zone is assumed to be the cause of the changes or exceedances. We do not consider this as a cross-border pollution as a possible input or cause of exceedances. That's what is the status. We need to improve that. But when you really look at, we have at least on two fronts, sea, East Coast, West Coast. So the crossover of the cross-border pollution over the sea is a little less. The chances are less, probability is less. One side there is Himalayas, so that's another wall, so to say, to this thing. And you can always have, doubts about the pollution coming in from the other side. because you know what is the status over there in that countries. Hardly any industries per se. But nevertheless, that is a possibility. Now, what is not considered or what is not discussed in Indian context is the long-term transport of pollutants. Now, this is something which is, yes, we do not have anything. We are only at the receiving end because of the Asian brown cloud being landing on Europe and America, USA. So that's something which is the other way around. We are not doing that kind of a study at all, which is another area which can be definitely taken up for, the studies. Especially when we talk of going net zero and other things, we should be prepared with data and adequate research for the inputs which we receive from others. That's my take. I hope I have, answered your question, Mr. Gowda.
Prashant, I would like to add here that
Uh,
in 2005, UNEP had initiated a project
uh,
under Monterey Declaration, and they
okay.
had initiated studies for transboundary movement of air pollutants, and
Yes.
it was established in 8 SAARC countries, and
Mhm.
effort was made to observe if there is any uh, transboundary movement of air pollutants. So Bangladesh reported that we are receiving some pollutant from an unknown source, and they actually traced it down to Singrauli thermal power stations. That from high
Okay.
stacks of Singrauli, some
Uh,
pollutants travel right up to Bangladesh. So that was
okay.
one incident is known to me.
Okay. So we are exporting more than what we get.
No, we are also getting more, but our neighboring countries are not that industrialized. That is why we are not
Yes,
getting.
yes.
Well, the other aspect which, Prashant, I was just thinking about this pollution. Industries may not contribute that much, but then when you try to look at it from the volume of air and their emission rate, sometimes when you do actual calculations, it comes out to be out of 60 gram is the 60 microgram per meter cube is the concentration are a limited standards. So their contribution, if you use it with their emission rate and other things, you will come out with 4 or 5 or maybe 10. I mean, it's all within the limits. So how do you look at it, how their contribution, because in the local other background concentration itself can be around 20, 30. So how do we look at it, these aspects, to when setting is happen for an industry, how do we look at it from the regulatory side?
From regulatory perspective or the other?
No, you can talk both on side because you have experience on either side.
See, it is like this. From industry perspective, well, it's always a feeling by the industry that we are, sitting ducks for any reduction. It's easy to, prescribed and easy to catch whether you are doing it or not. So when there is a force for reduction, the regulator actually tries to impose things without any logic or reason to reduce emissions from industries. This has been the stand traditionally. Now, if you really look at the urbanization is the cause of pollution more than the industries. Their contribution is more. The humans contribute to more, but there is no way you can control it because you are not a source which is concentrated. You cannot ask a colony to reduce. We have moved on at least only for the waste generated from the colonies to that direction, but not air emissions directly. The number of cars that ply, number of buses that ply, all those things are not directly being considered as sources big enough to be controlled. The sporadic things, forget that. I am not talking of Delhi case where, there is a court forced, change. Nowhere else. It's not there in Mumbai. We talk of Mumbai air, this thing. Look at the papers published by CPCB. Mr. Prashant Gargav had publish the status report of Mumbai during COVID, where everything was shut down, and see the drastic reduction. That means the population is contributing more. And in that case, even the regulator is at the loss as to say, what do I do? They have no solutions for the people-related emissions, which are contributing directly to the air quality. They are localized, spread over the city, and very much being attributed to day-to-day living. Now, if that is the case, how do you control? That's a challenge. So it will call for a complete lifestyle change, which may or may not be, possible for all because of affordability. So that is where affordability comes in for the solutions. So this is a challenge. Only time will tell, especially in Mumbai when the metro starts operating, whether it will bring down, at least for the time being, the ambient air quality gets better or not. We'll see, because the number of vehicles should come down with that. So that is something which will be an indicator.
Delhi is an example. Number of vehicles increased after metro came up.
Yeah, but fortunately or unfortunately, Mumbai is a linear city. So parking vehicles is a big challenge already. So I don't think there will be any further increase possible. Maybe for two-wheelers, not for four-wheelers at all. There is no place.
Okay, Prashant, there's a very interesting aspects which you are bringing out. See, there's one more question. I think the student has asked. He's talking about. One minute. So there is a guidelines, air quality guidelines by WHO. Provides a clear evidence of damage of air pollution in implicits on human health at ever lower concentration than previously understood. Okay, so basically, I mean, it's as we come out with a new, research findings, because as the technology is improving and our understanding also keep improving. That is clear. But my other point, which I thought you rightly mentioned, say for example, the constructions are happening. For example, metro construction. You take an example. Now, in that particular area, we are increasing the pollution levels maybe by 2-3 times more. And the perception happens, all of us, maybe because we are going to use and experience the similar conditions for, maybe assume that metro construction generally happens at least 2 years. So we are experiencing very bad air quality in that particular area because of the construction activity. So now all of a sudden, when the metros happen, started playing and the construction activity is completely over. So the perception of 2-3-fold increase in pollutant concentration coming to less than or even the quite average concentrations. I mean, is this making any influence on our perception? Because we are exposing continuously for last a couple of months with a higher concentration, and all of a sudden we're noticing there is no such activity increase in pollutant concentration. So I will look at that aspect.
Well, actually, these are all the things which we should actually put up as research projects. This is something which is there. See, for 2 years, I am going to have extra exposure. Then am I going to recover after that health-wise, or it is going to continue? And what is it? I mean, do we see in the industry nowadays, after the climate change, we started building the concept of price of carbon within the project. Now, do we have price of health during construction phase inbuilt in our project costings? That's the question which I am going to put up for all of us to have on our mind. I am relating it to the carbon. Cost of carbon is something which is inbuilt in any new project when industry takes it up. So similarly, the cost of health, whether we are building up in the project, is the challenge.
Yeah, and I completely agree with you. Just in a similar note, because since now we are all have some details, like you have just indicated, the industry standards, maybe the standards from the local community activities, maybe quite complicated in terms of the activities. So when you try to regulate them, so for example, right now the standards are specified for industry, but we don't have a standards for, although we have a standards for vehicles exhaust emissions, but nobody maintains, and we are sure that the vehicle designed for some load may be overloaded, and hence the emissions can be much more higher. The road emissions coming from the resuspension of dust itself can be significant.
Yes.
And how do we look at it? Is there any thought process, since based on your experience, should we move forward to rethink our emission standards? Not only in this aspect, probably we should also try to bring out some additional standards in order to an activity based. So what do you think about that?
See, changing the standard and who is responsible for implementation of standard, that's not answer. See, there is a question, do we need to revise our NAQ standards considering updated WHO guidelines? That is question put up by Mr. Bhakaran. Now, see, the answer to this is this. Okay, now you change anything, you do any modification in standard, quality standard, okay. Who is going to be responsible for it? See, when you have 275 meters stacks, which is, as you know, Mr. Gupta said just now, that Singrauli is received by the Bangladesh. Can you hold somebody responsible who is very close to the source, but source is not contributing? You are not meeting ambient air quality standard. Is it a non-compliance? If the industry is not contributing, if that particular thing, see who controls the source which is not actually under control. Like what you said, the resuspension of dust. If these are the causes which are known, somebody has to be made responsible for the control of these sources. Now, unless you do that, any adjustment or corrections in your standard is of no meaning. It's not going to serve any purpose.
Okay.
Somebody has to act on the source, which is causing these excursions.
Prashant,
yeah, Gupta ji, please go ahead.
Yes, I point out that in our Air Pollution Act, it is the responsibility of the Pollution Control Board to maintain the wholesomeness of the air quality. And that is their mandate given to them. But unfortunately, they have not focusing their attention on maintaining the wholesomeness of air, but only in the emission control. Because that is easy. It is easy to catch an industry and put fine or regulate them. But it is not easy to regulate people's activities or have a control over the transportation or resuspension of dust or all kind of fugitive emissions. So that is the unfortunate part, that the role assigned to the pollution control boards are not taken over fully by them, because their role is to maintain the wholesomeness of air quality. That is the mandate in the Air Pollution Act.
Okay. Gupta ji, thank you very much. And also, Prashant ji, I think you have, this is a different type of lecture we always listen to, mostly with research, with particularly focus in depth into understanding basic principles, to look at it, what is research is contributed. But from the management point of view, I think what you discussed is very, very important and relevant. And I think it is definitely opened a new thought process for the, thinking to students and understand all the researchers, as Gupta ji has rightly mentioned. Okay, there is a need for all of us to rethink and how do we manage how do we make ourselves understand the particularly when we talk about this air quality management issues in different areas. Sometimes we don't have to follow what others are practicing. Sometimes we now the technology is evolved, and we are also aware of many things, and we know that what something has happened 10 years back may not be correct now because it may happen something else also. So in that context, I think you have provided a right information and examples. We thank you very much. And I also thank Gupta ji and Madhusudan and all other colleagues from the different industries and Pollution Control Board for joining this talk. And also thank many research students, and basically you will see that many of them will going to take responsible positions maybe down the years, young researchers. And thank you all of them for joining this talk, and we look forward the next air quality management lecture series. Thank you, Prashant ji, very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Shiva, and thank you, sir. Gupta ji, thank you very much for, I am honored that you are there in my lecture. Thank you very much.
My pleasure.
He is my guru.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. Yeah.
Bye-bye.